While we are all celebrating and have almost popped the champagne corks, those at Oxford University involved with the vaccine trial say more research and studying needs to be done before we can call it game over. Professor Adrian Hill is with me. He is the director of Oxford University's Jenner Institute. And I'm sure you're going to rightly remind me out the gate that more work does need to be done. But the results of the tests so far, in my layman's terms, correct me, one, it seems to work, and two, it doesn't seem to do any dramatic, dangerous damage.
Well, we've learned two things today in the report that we published in The Lancet. The first is that, yes, in the first 1,000 or so vaccinees in this trial, the safety profile has been pretty good and reassuring, and we've seen no significant concerns. What's harder to judge is the immune response that we've seen to the vaccine. It does look pretty good. We're stimulating both arms of the human immune system. But from that alone, we can't guarantee that the vaccine will work. And of course, we have to show that before we can license it, before we can deploy it, before we can save lives with it. So certainly a step forward today, good safety, promising immune responses, but we've yet to see efficacy itself.
So how do you test efficacy? Assuming you have those who have been given placebos and you've got those who've been given the actual vaccine, but how do you test whether or not they have caught or would have caught? I mean, you don't know whether they've been in contact with it. How do you do that?
We recruit 10,000 people. We've just about done that. We vaccinate half of them with the COVID vaccine, half with an irrelevant vaccine for another disease, and we follow them for weeks or months. Hopefully, we won't need to do that for years. And we count the number of cases in those given the vaccine and those given the control. And hopefully, there are far fewer cases in those who have been vaccinated. We started doing this at the end of May, and we are still following those individuals and may have to do so for another couple of months or a few months to see whether we get a result. Because, as you know, the incidence of COVID is declining in the UK, which makes it harder to get a trial result very quickly.
Right, so I assume you hoof it on a plane to places, unfortunately, like India, South Africa, Brazil, where those whom you vaccinate, pardon the awfulness of it, stand a better chance of perhaps coming into contact with it and getting it or not.
Absolutely right. So we've already started vaccinating in Brazil, in South Africa as well. And the next country in the next few weeks, we hope, will be the United States. So between those three countries, about 40,000 more people will be vaccinated. So by the end of the year, we'll have had about 50,000 subjects in clinical trials, and with a fair wind, should have an efficacy result, hopefully some months before that.
Right, now, in my sort of relatively simplistic thinking, I've thought of this as a race. Who gets there first? Winner takes all. But listen to what the Moderna chairman was saying about how it's not a case of winner takes all. The world needs lots of vaccines.
We're in the camp of believing that multiple vaccines is what humanity needs to fight this disease, because none of the parties, despite announcements, are actually going to be able to produce the quantities needed for the challenge that we're facing. And so the best way to get there is to have multiple approaches and the vaccine get out as quickly as possible to those who need it.
So Professor, you need lots of vaccine. Obviously, you hope to be the first. And with AstraZeneca, you'll be able to produce a lot of them. But you're learning from your competitors.
We're all learning from each other. None of us knows yet just what quality and quantity of immune response will be required. But we do know that given 7.5 billion people or more on the planet, most of whom are going to want a vaccination, we suspect, that no single company can do this. So we agree with Moderna. We are being ambitious with AstraZeneca, aiming for about 2 billion doses over the next year. That's a huge ask. No vaccine has ever been supplied at a quarter of that amount in any year for any disease. And these are all new vaccines by definition this year. So we're reaching for that 2 billion target. We will find out whether we can do that or not. We will find out first whether the vaccine works before we start supplying that. But we completely agree that several companies are needed to do the heavy lifting and get as many vaccine doses as are needed out over the next year.
Professor, what does your gut feeling tell you? I mean, you know, I've sat here every night for months covering this and talking about it, but you're actually involved in this. What does your gut tell you about when a vaccine will realistically be in whether it's yours or somebody else's, it be in widespread distribution, and we can at least say we've got a proper global grip on coronavirus?
I think getting a grip on coronavirus will be next year. Having a vaccine distributed, hopefully, will be before the end of this year. But remember, distributed is anything from producing 1 million doses to 2 billion doses. And the sooner we get an efficacy result that is positive, the faster we can scale up. So I think it's really quite likely that we will know by the end of this year, or maybe even a few months before that some vaccine works. Having hundreds of millions of doses immediately afterwards is unlikely. Millions, certainly, tens of billions, possibly. But it's going to be a graded response, so we're going to have to prioritize certain populations. Maybe the older population, maybe people who are first responders.
Mm-hmm.
The healthcare
Professor, allow the rest of us to drink the champagne in anticipation. I suspect you are going to wait a little bit longer before you open your bottle, but know that the Godspeed and best wishes from the rest of us go with you, sir. I'm grateful for you taking time tonight.
Thank you very much.